Hello and welcome to your Week 3, Day 3 lecture. Please take notes today as you will be responsible for this information not only for your group charter memo that is due at the end of this week, but also for the quiz by 8 p.m. tonight. Today we are going to discuss Office memos. Memos are very common in industry. You will see them quite a bit, so I'm going to break down each memo into the individual components. Memos have four main functions in industry. First thing that they can do is remind readers about important events. So when memos serve as reminders, usually they're pretty short and usually they're sent out by the boss or a head of a department. Memos can also give directives. They can provide instructions and information, and this is in yellow because that's what you're doing for my class. And they can make requests. Memos are composed of 4 or 5 parts, depending on whether or not you have attachments. For the sake of my class, you will not have attachments, so you don't need to worry about that. We'll start with the heading. In your heading section, usually memos will have some kind of logo of the company itself. This is a Cal Poly memo heading. You're not required to design any kind of logo for my class, but it could help if you wanted to practice. It could help with document design. Directly underneath the logo is going to be the word memorandum or memo, depending on how formal you want your document to sound. And that word is going to be either flush left or center, depending on how you want your document to look. And then this section should look pretty familiar. It looks like an email. Memos are essentially formal versions of emails. In the to section, you're going to have the person who is going to be reading the document or the group who is going to be reading the document. For the sake of the assignment that is going to be due for you guys, I'm going to be your main reader, so the to is going to be addressed to Morgan White. From is going to be the person who submits the assignment to Canvas. Your subject is going to be the main kind of purpose of the following memo. Be as specific as you can, regardless of what type of memo you're writing. The subject line needs to be specific so that the person who is reading it can figure out whether or not they need to continue reading. Remember that memos are sent out to groups of people, they're sent out to full companies, and so some people inherently are not going to be involved in whatever the subject of the memo is, so you should give enough information so they know whether or not to continue reading. The date will be the date that you send out the memo. And the copies are going to be your other group members who are not directly involved in the conversation between me and the person who submits, but who are involved in the actual process of writing the memo. We'll start with the opening segment. Your opening segment is your introduction. It's a fancy way of saying the word introduction. Your introduction section is not going to be labeled, so you can see that in the example here, and it's going to be very short. You're going to essentially outline an overview of what the memo is about. Tell the readers what to expect. This section should start with the words, "The purpose of this memo is blank," and go from there. It's not rocket science. You should directly tell your readers what the purpose is. In this paragraph, you'll also explain any additional attachments that the readers should expect. For the sake of my assignment, you're not going to be including any attachments, but know that for industry, there might be a situation where you'd include an attachment to a memo. Next is your body copy. Your body copy is focused on the topic that is outlined in your introduction. Please use white space, use bullets, use headings, make it scannable. So document design is key for this section of the memo. If this would be, say, a full paragraph long per page, readers are not going to read it, so you want to make it scannable and help them out a little bit. This section should be complete but compact. Use as few words as possible. And finally is your closing segment or your conclusion. It's going to quickly just wrap up the memo, and I will say this kind of repeatedly throughout my class. Every conclusion in tech writing will have a call to action. Some of the call to actions are going to be something like, if you have any questions, please let me know. Others are going to directly tell your readers what to do. For my assignment, I am your reader, and so you're going to want to essentially ask me for feedback before you guys move forward as a group. Please do not sign the bottom of this section. This is not a letter, it is a memo. There are different requirements for each one. In terms of the formatting itself, on your second and subsequent pages, you're going to include a header. Remember, headers repeat on different pages. It will not be included on your first page. In this section, you'll have the subject that was outlined on your first page blank of blank, and the date that you submitted. So it should kind of match the first page of your memo. Here's an example of one of my old assignments, but you can see what that would look like. It can either be on the right or the left of the page in the header or the footer, but I do recommend the header. Document design is a big part of your rubric for this assignment. Please use a sans serif font. Justify your text on both sides. That depends on the company itself, but I'm going to treat our class like a company and say that I prefer justified text on both sides. Use headings, use bullet points, make it scannable. I already mentioned that. And as an option, you can use color to help with scannability. This memo right here looks really good. It's very pleasing to the eye. It's in a sans serif font. It's something that you can experiment a little bit in your groups. Please also include the page number on each one of your sections of your memo. I should be able to, refer to page 6 if you tell me to look at page 6. In industry, each company is going to have their own type of memo formatting. A lot of the times you can just simply download a memo template for each company. So for example, Cal Poly does have its own memo template, and I do use that kind of quite frequently to teach memos. So here's an example of a memo template that's on the left. Here's one for Lawrence Livermore Lab. Here's a really old school Apple memo. This one was a hard copy, but you can tell that each company has their own design principles, and you're going to want to, if you're a tech writer in industry, you're going to want to use those samples rather than coming up with your own from scratch. Now I'm going to break down the requirements for your group charter memo that will be due for my class. In this memo, you're going to start with your purpose, and so again, your introduction, your opening section. Please don't label it. This one is labeled. You do not need to do that. Start with the purpose of this memo is blank, and then include a mission statement. So each group should have its own kind of mission for writing your memo. Tell me what it is. In your expectations and protocol section, you're going to outline your overall expectations for the project. Explain how committed is each person to the project, what grade range you're aiming for, and what steps that you're going to take to get to that grade. I added the technology policy this quarter. The reason for that is because everything is going to be online and virtual. I want you to be able to outline your expectations for your group members up front. Tell me how often you and your group members are expected to respond to emails and group chats. So if an email was sent at 8 p.m., how many hours do your group members have to be able to respond to it to do well on this assignment? How often will you check in virtually with your groups? When are you going to hold your Zoom meetings? And how many warnings will you allow your group members if they are not responding to text messages? You will have a conflict resolution section where you'll answer 3 questions. The first question is, what will you do if a group member does not meet their deadlines? The second is, what will you do if a group member makes the deadlines but the group work is subpar? So say they turn in something that just looks crappy or is filled with sentence level errors. What will you do to that group member? And then the last one will be, what will you do if a group member is rude, disruptive, uninvolved, distracted, all of the above? So say you're holding a Zoom meeting and one of your group members is just sitting there texting the whole time. What will you do in that kind of situation? And then there's a firing clause. So outline what will happen if a group member is fired. A lot of the groups will choose to do something like allow up to 2 warnings or something like that. This is a very short project, and so I'd say maybe allow 1 warning and then you would fire them from there. Totally up to you. You guys can discuss this on your own time. But please tell me what will happen to the person if they are fired. This group said that if a member is fired, they'll get 50% of the final grade. You guys can discuss that. Please define what the warnings are. So is a warning texting during a meeting? Would you get a warning for producing subpar work? You define that for the readers. And I will refer to this if I hear any complaints about students who are not doing the full work. So please do communicate with me. But please don't tell me that Morgan is going to be the one who determines what the penalty is. I want you guys to discuss that as a group. I don't want to be the bad guy. You'll also outline your group work roles. So here are some suggestions that I have for you. You should have an organizer, someone who's in charge of delegating. An editor would be good, someone who feels comfortable writing and proofreading. And a researcher. You are going to be required to do some research for this assignment, so have someone dedicated to that. If you have a group of 4, maybe have 2 researchers or 2 editors. It depends on what you want. Or you guys can come up with your own roles yourselves. Totally up to you. I will additionally see group member bios, so please include bios and contact information for each one of your group members. Keep a workplace paradigm in mind. So what that means is you want to think about what biographical information you'll include with the tone of a workplace. And the last thing that I'll see before your conclusion is your project calendar. You can do it actually in a calendar format, or you can do it like on the left here. Please keep in mind that I do need to see 2 types of deadlines. I need to see your internal deadlines and your external deadlines. Your internal deadlines are deadlines that your group gives to yourselves. So, you know, outlining specifically what person will be doing what at what time. But then also your external deadlines are the ones that I give to you on Canvas. So look at my deadlines and include those. An internal deadline would also be when your group meetings will be. So that was all that I have for you for memo writing. If you have any questions, please let me know. Remember, your conclusion will have a call to action to it, and please do look at the rubric for the assignment. Before I finish up this lecture, I want to quickly go over Tuckman's model because you are required to think about it as you go through your project. At the end of your trees project, you're going to have a reflection memo where you tell me how you and your group progressed through this model. In 1965, Bruce Tuckman, came up with this model for group development, and he says that each one of these phases is inevitable and necessary. Every successful group will go through each one of these stages, and there are 5 of them. He added a 5th one in, I think, like the 80s or 90s. The first component of group work is forming. So that is physically when your group forms, when it gets together. Once your group forms, you are bringing all kinds of different experiences from your past group work to that space. And so say a lot of my students come into group work saying, "Oh, I hate group work. I've always had horrible experiences." So I want you to think about, when I'm forming these groups, I want you to think about what kind of vibe you're bringing into the group work and try to work that through. If you're bringing a negative vibe, a lot of the times it turns into a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you don't want that to happen. So reflect on that experience. After the group is formed, which your groups by today will have already been formed, you're going to move into your storming. Storming does have a negative connotation. Storming is when you have any kind of conflict in your group. It's when there's power dynamics. It's when you're trying to figure out your role within the group and maybe you're conflicting with someone else. It's characterized by feelings of uncertainty and anxiety. And so your goal is to get out of the storming stage as quickly as possible. But do know that this is an inevitable stage to good group work development. You need to figure out the power structures before you can move on to more productive things. After your storming stage, you'll move on to the norming stage. In norming is when it's characterized by kind of you getting to know your group mates. It's when you start to joke around, you develop a rapport with your group mates. It's a good stage to be in. However, the danger of being in this stage is that you become distracted and you focus more on getting to know your group mates and less on the task at hand. So it's another stage that you want to get through relatively quickly, but it is good and healthy for group dynamics. And finally is your performing stage. This is the stage that you really want to get into. This stage is characterized by the word flow. It's when every person in the group knows exactly what is expected of them. They work with their heads down, and it's good. You really want to get there. And the last stage that Tuckman added later on is the word adjourning, A-D-J-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, adjourning. And adjourning is when your group dissipates. It's when you have hit your goals and your group is done. And the most important part of that stage is reflection on what you did well as a group and what you could have improved on as a group, because you're going to be taking those same vibes with you to your next group project. So please review these stages before you write your reflection memo for my class. For your trees project, you will be required to think about them deeply. So I hope you did take notes during this section. If you have any other questions for me, please let me know, and I look forward to seeing your group memos.